Break out the Danish pastries, because this week it's Flickering Lights from 2000. This is a kind of film where it's really about the relationship and friendship between the characters, the dynamic of like a small group of friends. This film technically starts out as a gangster film, doesn't stay a gangster film for long, briefly becomes a road trip movie for about 5 minutes until the car sets on fire, and then settles down into a weird soul search movie, I guess, as they find a little place in the countryside that they love and make their own, despite the fact that none of them could have predicted they would have enjoyed this at the start of the film. You know, they're gangsters, but they're not gangsters. They're more thugs, knuckleheads, kind of idiots, good-natured for the most part, capable of horrific violence, but also good, likeable lads. And the fact that they've known each other so long from childhood, and we find out their backstories later on in the film, it really adds to how much you're rooting for them, not even individually, but as a unit.
They seem to be idiots. The film starts, they're on a dock waiting for a delivery. You can see straight away the dynamic of who's the leader. And it turns out they're there to pick up a delivery of cigarettes. That they open it and the cigarettes are wrong and you're like, oh, these guys are buffoons. Like, do you know what I mean? So it really does a good job in the opening few minutes to setting up their sad life.
It's hilarious as well because the poor Polish lorry driver doesn't speak their language clearly and doesn't know what they're saying. And he thinks it's just like a happy little interaction. Like, oh, cigarettes. And they're saying like, it's the wrong brand. And he's just sort of pointing cigarettes.
Cigarettos.
And then one of them starts beating the shit out of the poor lorry driver who's on the floor getting the shit kicked out of him. The guy who's always kind of dressed a bit smarter in the shirt walks over to be like, hey, you know, calm down, blah, blah, blah. But then you see a big blood spurt go across the guy's shirt and he immediately blames the poor lorry driver and starts joining in to beat it down. So I was cracking up right from the opening scene. And like you said, it sets it perfectly. The dynamic, you see the leader of the group, you see the slight neurotic member of the group, there's the young, I mean, I don't even think he's supposed to be that much younger than him, but in maturity and his role within the group, he's essentially the youngster, the teenager, the son, whatever you want to call him, the one who is kind of dumb and going along with everything. He's part of a gang and gang life, but he seemingly has a weird innocence to him nearly. And then you also see Mad Mikkelsen playing a completely different role than I'm used to. You know, he's probably most well known or most recognized as the Bond villain from Casino Royale. I'm used to seeing him usually playing a menacing character or like the evil corporate guy who's running shenanigans behind the scenes. Always very calm and collected. I feel like once he's hit Hollywood, he's understandably cast more on his looks. He can back up what he's being cast for because he's a good actor. He can play the calm, collected, calculating, villainous character really well. But this was totally different. Like you could see straight away, he's usually immaculate and like prim and proper, but his hair's all shaggy. He's wearing a wife beater the whole time. It's got like baked bean stains going down it. He's always got some sort of gun in his hand. Really quick to violence. Reminded me a bit of a Danish Robert Carlyle from Trainspotting, but a much more charming, moral version, even though he is a bit crazy. He's not a lunatic. He's just got a slightly crazy undertone to him, but not an evil one or a malicious one necessarily. And I loved seeing him in a totally different role.
Yeah, I don't know if he's malicious. I just think he has a very short fuse. There's long periods of him being the calm person in the group, you know, the moral guy, but as soon as he loses his temper, it's game over. We've seen the gangster element. Now we swiftly move along to see a snapshot of Torkild's life outside of it when he goes to meet his girlfriend for a dinner. As soon as he sits down in the restaurant, looks like a nice restaurant, by the way. She's kind of distant, you know, it's his birthday and she's got him a book and he opens it and he's like, oh, thank you again for the book. But she's like, I actually got this for you last year and you didn't read it.
It's Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, that awful kind of self-help book from the 90s.
He's kind of like, do you want to go back to mine to shag? An air of arrogance about him. He's fully expecting her to just be like, yeah, let's go. And she's like, no, I don't. It's over. I've met someone else from the newspaper. And he's kind of like, who is it? Who is he? Like, let me come and see him. She's like, no, you're not going to beat him up. And we see that anger.
It's teeing up the motivation because, you know, you can see, okay, so his missus has left him because he's not grown up. He's still doing the same knucklehead shit. He's promising her, once I pay off the Eskimo, who's the big gangster, shadowy figure that's running everything. Once my debt to him's paid off, you know, I'll settle down and I'll do this and I'll do that. And it's the same promises she's obviously heard year after year. And she's just like, had enough of it. She doesn't even really like this other guy particularly. He's like, what, you love him? And she's like, I guess so. It's a clear, I'm settling. I want kids. I want a family. You know, I'm infatuated with you, but I'm done. I'll go off with this fucking nerd. Go fuck him and have kids and use him. So he's sad and he's down and out and he trots off and he's clearly paranoid because it's his birthday and he's left this demoralising dinner dinner with his missus and now his ex, and he's sneaking into building. I don't know if it's not his house,
It's
obviously.
his house, I don't know.
It didn't look like his house.
It looked like a warehouse.
Maybe it's a place they coordinate their gangster shenanigans from. I'm not really sure, but he's sneaking into it anyway. And he senses there's someone in there or someone's broken in already, even though it's dark. So he gets his gun out and he's moving around in the dark. He sees a shadowy silhouette, fires at it. Then the lights go on for a surprise birthday party. And you see poor Stefan, the youngster, holding this champagne bottle. Just a spout is left because the rest of it's had the bullet shatter it. And everyone's looking in this awkward moment where they're just looking at him like, oh shit.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this scene because, you know, there's a bit of like talking, smoozing as you do at these silly parties. And, you know, they give Torkid his present and it turns out to be an AK-47. And the other guy is like, oh, let's just fire it off now. And he's like, no.
That sets up his obsession in the movie. He loves guns. Torkid's always being like, put that gun away, or you were supposed to get rid of that. Well, you know, we used that in a job. Get rid of it. He'll pretend to throw it away, but he'll have it hidden somewhere up his sleeve, even when they dump all the guns. And he just loves guns.
Someone comes in late to the party, a young, eager girl, all excitable, and it turns out to be Stefan's girlfriend.
And it's the classic thing where all the lads hate the new guy's girlfriend. They're not very nice to her. They're all kind of rude to her. She comes in and she's looking like, oh, is that a real gun? Is that a replica? It can't be a real gun, of course. In that annoying, tutting, ruin the vibe of the fun friend's girlfriend sort of way, like they can only do. Stefan is just the classic, sits there with his mouth open, not sure how to resolve conflict between his friends and his girlfriend, and he gets the little nudge in the arm like, did you hear what he said to me? Sort of vibes off of her. Now, it's funny because initially she's set up as the classic sort of douche Yono Oko character. I didn't actually mind her. I didn't realise that was what her character was meant to be until way later on in the film when it was made obvious. During this scene, I actually found her pretty endearing and likeable. Usually they make those sort of girls or guys in these films less attractive and more overtly annoying. I like the fact that she wasn't an over-the-top cartoon version of that sort of character profile. She was quite subtle and just subtly annoying and a bit weird. She reminded me a bit of Peep Show when Mark is getting ready to actually marry Sophie and he meets her parents and he sees all like the weird birthday rituals they have and stuff like that. You know, she's one of those girls. She's weirder the more you uncover. And then the big Eskimo gangster shows up at his birthday party with a sort of sarcastic, why wasn't I invited? He takes Torkid in the back room, beats the shit out of him, says, listen, you can't pay your debt. I don't trust you to pay your debt anymore, so you're my bitch now. You're going to do whatever I want. You're going to do whatever job I want. And it's not going to be one big heist that you can pull off and then you're all paid up. It's going to be loads of little jobs and you're done when I say you're done.
Yeah.
So Torkid's like, this is rock bottom. I'm fucked. I'm snookered. My missus has left me. I'm too old for this stuff. I can't even have a surprise birthday party without accidentally pulling a gun on one of my friends and nearly shooting him. And to top it all off, I'm now the gangster's bitch.
And the job he gets given by the Eskimo is a bit of a weird one, actually. He's sent to a Greek diplomat's house. Probably pick a different squad if I was honest. They look quite amateurish. They just break the window really unprofessionally, sneak in. For some reason they start getting boners over a mirror. Like literally, this is a really nice mirror. Then Arnie comes along and smashes it and he's like, why the fuck are you playing around with this? Like, we've got a job to do. So you see he's trying to hold the glue together while the rest are messing about. Stefan's just gone missing. Like literally they're like, Stefan, where are you? Like, and then that's German, but anyways, he comes back and he's fucking raided the fridge. Oh, this is really nice, guys. You should try it. Getting his fingerprints over everything. Really amateurish again. They finally find the safe and get the money, but you kind of know as the audience member, these four are idiots. Something is going to go wrong. Like, they're not just going to steal the money and get out safely. Because remember, this is a diplomat's house. It's a huge mansion, so they're going to have security. And then a security guard comes along, starts shooting them. They start shooting back. Unfortunately, the security guard shoots Peter in the stomach, and he's like, oh, I've been shot. Then it turns into a Reservoir Dogs kind of like scenario where they bundle him into the back of a car. They don't really know what to do with Peter because you can't just go to the hospital, can you, Declan? All the while they're like, we need to get this money to the Eskimo, but we need to get him medical treatment. And then they're kind of just driving around. As you said, it's a road trip movie for about 5 minutes. The shitty little car they've got breaks down and sets on fire. Then Arnie, for some reason, decides to shoot the car further to make it blow up, and everything about them is poor. It's just hysterical. They come across a sort of dilapidated house and they basically said, look, it's getting dark, let's just camp out in here, it's our only option. So we've then gone to like a siege film in a way, like camped out and assessing their next move.
Yeah, I really liked as well the fact that once he's stolen the bag and they've looked in it and realised it's like 4 million Danish kroner. How the fuck that amounts to
£2.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's either a lot or not as much. I don't know. It could be 100 billion.
A Freddo you can buy.
But either way, he decides that's enough for us to make a whole new life. And it's funny because Torkid just kind of decides for him. We've already kind of established he's the leader, but it's funny because they all really look up to him, especially Arnie. Arnie seems to not give a fuck about anyone, not really respect anyone. He's rude and he'll just say whatever he thinks. But he's always got a side eye on Torkil to see what he's going to do, what he thinks about it. And he'll always go with him, even if he's not so overt of like, yeah, I do whatever Torkil says. Stefan, he sits there with his mouth open,
he's
like,
an idiot.
with a fly buzzing in and out of it, sort of being like, what are we doing? I have a girlfriend.
Jeffries.
Yeah.
Matthew Jeffries.
No one understands that.
Yeah.
He's just kind of like, what are we doing? Okay. And goes along with it. Peter's been shot, so he has no choice about where he's going. He's just in the back of the terrible getaway car that soon sets on fire, begging to have a doctor see him at some point. So they're in the ranch and they settle down, like, okay, what are we going to do? We need a doctor. Let's get a doctor for Peter first thing. So the first morning they notice some guy buzzing about. He's like this weird local farmer / hunter who really reminded me of a Danish version of the creepy uncle from With Nail and I.
Yes.
He's got that exact look.
You'll be me with me, my boy.
And he's kind of got the mannerisms a little bit. He's not effeminate like the uncle from With Nail and I, but he's odd. And you kind of realise he's a bit more odder as it goes on. Again, when his character was introduced, I thought, okay, he's going to be the local dickhead who we don't like for whatever reason. Like if someone's going to grasp to the gangsters towards the end of the film, which you kind of predict is probably going to happen, I was thinking, okay, it's probably going to be him. Because he's introduced, he's kind of being rude to him, he's saying this, he's saying, oh, you're not bringing a bunch of refugees with you and all that stuff.
He's a racist.
But then he's introduced, like as the film goes on, he actually becomes a really pivotal, positive character, and you get his backstory as well. So he assumes they've bought the place. So he's like, oh, this place, no one's used it for 20 years. It's been abandoned. Hope you got a cheap price for it. Torkild goes along with that as the cover story. And he also says, I need a doctor. Take me into town. So he comes back with Carl, the doctor, who again is another one of these funny, eccentric characters from this part of the countryside who sort of becomes a weird father figure in the film. He immediately bonds to him, despite the fact that, you know, he doesn't seem like a very serious doctor. He shows up drink driving, sort of extorts him basically to get a load of money in order to treat Peter for his gunshot wound. But then all he does is pour some whiskey out of his flask on the wound and says, oh, keep him still for 2 weeks, and walks out.
I immediately liked the hunter. He just had like that eccentric elements to him, and I like the way that he set up that what the building was. You know, this used to be a restaurant. I used to come here with my dad, so like it has that air of nostalgia about it. And the doctor, was just hilarious, the way he like turned up drinking the whiskey. And I don't know how he got his medical license, but I assume it's one of those small towns where there's a doctor every 100 miles or something, you know what I mean? And
but it just sets out perfectly where you're like, okay, they're in the house now, they're in the countryside, they have a reason why they have to stay there for several weeks. But even before it's really introduced the idea of them ever wanting to stay here, Torkild pretty much instantly seems to love it. He's saying, oh, well, our cover story is we bought the place because we're opening up a restaurant. So I'm just going to go and buy loads of supplies and food and stock, and we should probably get a big kitchen in the back. And they're all sort of looking like, why is he spending all our fucking run away to Mexico for the rest of our lives money on this horse shit? So you already see Torkild's already kind of convincing himself he wants to stay here.
As you said, Torkid goes to town and then he comes back with just junk and rubbish, really. He comes back with a load of videos, a load of like Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale books, and saying to the lads, no more swearing, and then they're like, fuck off, like what's all this, where's our money? And you talked about their runaway. They all sort of hatched the plan, using the money, we're all going to go Barcelona. And then the other lads are like objecting, we're meant to be going Barcelona, why are you making us stay in this shithole? And he starts going over to Peter, and how do you expect us to drive to Barcelona Barcelona on those roads, like shaking him, and he's like, and he's like, the doctor says we have to keep him still, so it sets up that here we are, we're going to stay here.
Then we get into the dream sequences, the childhood trauma sequences, which are really, really odd. It had like the same aesthetic as when Happy Gilmore goes to his happy place when he's trying to get that shot at the end of the movie. You know, it's like the aperture's turned up a bit too high. The acting style's a bit different. Everything's kind of a bit dreamlike and odd. Even the scenarios that we see the different characters go through are all a little bit odd. They sound like they're nearly the memory of a memory rather than what actually happened, the way it plays out in these scenes. Tall Kid, you see his childhood first. He's a single child with his parents living in this tiny cottage with one bedroom, and he has to sleep at the bottom of their bed nearly like a dog.
Weird.
And he's constantly saying, why do we live here? Can we move to a bigger place? I want my own bedroom. He's about 19 when this is all going on. Pretty much grown man, sleeping with his parents still. It's really weird. And he's getting upset, but his dad's like, we can't move. What are you talking about? The apple tree's finally blooming after 8 years. And it's this measly apple tree, just 3 apples on it. And Tall Kid starts resenting his dad so much that he goes out every night and he takes a different apple and he poisons the last apple. And you see his parents getting more and more upset all the time. And when he poisons the final apple, him and his mum come out to find his dad hanging from the tree.
It's so fucked. It's kind of like the Mendes brothers, but a lot shitter.
Yeah. A lot tamer as well.
Yeah.
But it's weird because it's the most surreal and silliest parts of the film. The rest of the film is comical, but it's grounded. Like a drama first, comedy second. But these are the most absurd parts of the film and the silliest, but they're kind of taken the most seriously in terms of like the film language, like how it's filmed and presented. It's all very serious and solemn. They're the breakthrough moments for each of the characters. It's very signpost, like there's no missing where their character arcs take a turn. Something about living out in the countryside or meeting these people gives them something or changes their perspective on things from their childhood in a way that makes them feel at home and makes them want to stay and makes them become better people. And there's again a really obvious blunt signposting of when their characters are brought in to live in there, because they knock off one by one. The film takes its time focusing on one character for a couple of sequences as they go through that process. Whenever they return from their dream sequence, remembering their trauma from being a child, and they're brought in, they always say howdy to all the other characters, and that's kind of like the signal to the audience. It's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. He's one of them now, you know. And it's the first greeting that the hunter says to him. So it's such blatant, obvious writing, but it's not bad writing. It's kind of intentional. It's the charm of the kind of film it is. Peter, we find out, is a massive cokehead. As well as trying to heal up from his gunshot wound to the stomach, he's also desperate for coke. He snorts his last little bit of it and he's looking around. He's been eating the same pizza for every day. They've been watching the same shit fucking films he doesn't want to watch anymore. He doesn't want to read any of the bullshit fucking poetry books that Tall Kids brought along. He just wants to do coke. They catch him one night calling up one of the old drug dealers they know, almost about to give him information on where they are. So they decide to throw him in the lock-in fridge and keep him there until he kicks the habit and he goes for his own childhood memory.
It's a weird one because obviously there's elements to like child abuse to all the dreamlike states. He gets caught smoking in the attic, and it's kind of like, you know when you used to swear and then your dad would be like, if you say that again, we'll wash your mouth out with soap. He catches him and he says, right, you're going in this wardrobe, and he gives him like 30 or 40 cigars, or a load of cigars, and said basically, I'm going to teach you a fucking lesson. You're not leaving this wardrobe until you smoke every single one of them. And having smoked cigars as well, like recently I went to Croatia, Hvar, for a wedding, and they had a humidor where they had cigars. I was like, fuck it, let me try one. And literally I smoked like 3 totes of it, and people smoked them for hours on end, and I was like, I can't smoke this anymore.
I never got cigars.
It's horrible.
I never got them because you don't inhale.
Yeah.
And there's something about like smoking and not inhaling. It feels like I'm taking a sip of beer, swirling it around in my mouth and spitting it out again. Do you know what I mean? It just doesn't feel right. But yeah, the sequence is really weird as well because he's in this little wardrobe.
They've cut a hole in it.
Yeah, the wardrobe has a window in it, and it's a circular window, nearly like a little church window. window with the sort of cross in between it, setting up the 4 individual panes. I know you're probably thinking like, why the fuck are you going into so much detail about this window? But the window seems to come up in all their dreams. In Torkild's memory, when he's having to sleep in the same bedroom as his parents, he looks out an identical shaped window, but larger one on the wall, and he's looking out to the countryside and this tree, and that seems to be, I guess, the moment he decides like, oh, I want to stay here, I want a place of my own. Like he says, I want my own room to his parents constantly. He's like, I want my own place. That's why he wants to stay. For the cokehead, he's in their wardrobe and his dad has a stroke, but he still doesn't let him out of the wardrobe, and you can see he wants him to die. He hates him. I didn't really get though, what do you think the connection is from that childhood memory and having to smoke all the cigars and being stuck in that wardrobe, stuck inside, claustrophobic, to his coke addiction? Because as the memory ends and he's still in the fridge, but he seems to have quit the habit, he's like a new man. He gets out of the fridge and he's like, no, I need to go further, and he decides like, I just want to be outside. He keeps walking away from the house. He keeps asking Torkid like, can I go over there? And Torkid's like, yeah, you can go wherever you want. Like, what do you mean? And he ends up moving further and further into the countryside and into the woods, and he's like, can I keep going? And he's like, yeah, and they keep following him, and he ends up on the beach, and they're all sat there like, wow, this is beautiful. And Arnie and Stefan throw off their clothes and start swimming in the sea, and Torkid and Peter are kind of just sat there by the beach just thinking about life and thinking about the place. And he's changed at that moment. He's bought in. He said howdy. He's in it now. Like, he is another one knocked off who wants to stay in this place. And actually this thing that was just a cover story is, before everyone else's eyes, becoming the real story, the reality. They're actually building this restaurant all of a sudden.
I mean, my take on it is like, after we see their abuse sequences, it's kind of like each character's like a phoenix rising from the ashes. Cokehead's so desperate for the open space, being trapped in the fridge, being trapped in his addictions, being trapped in his previous traumas. He just literally goes into the cold sea wearing his full suit, and you know, everyone's like, mate, you've been in that fridge for weeks, you stink of shit, do you not want to get in the shower? And for me, he just goes to the biggest, open, widest space he can, and the endless sea in front of him, and it's just a rebirth scene to me. It's very poignant, very powerful.
So the doctor's teaching him to cook now. Arnie seems to be his worst cook, but for whatever reason, the one he's kind of focusing on. Arnie doesn't like cooking, he doesn't want to cook, and he's not good at it. But all the others have, for some reason, kind of just designated him the cook of this restaurant that he doesn't want to be a part of. And he's sitting there getting taught the lessons, and the doctor drinks a bit, and he's like, that's disgusting. He's smoking a cigarette down, and he doesn't ash it, and all the ash goes into the soup. Clearly, he doesn't give a shit, and he doesn't like the doctor. Challenges him, like, how do you even know how to cook? You're a doctor. And he says, well, my wife was a shit cook, so for 17 years I had to cook for my wife and my kids. And then he reveals they died in a car crash, and everyone's kind of a bit like, oh, you know, even Arnie softens a bit, and he's like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. But then he storms off because he shits on him about his cooking again. But it's funny because we notice as well interactions between the hunter and the doctor. They don't seem to like each other or don't trust each other. The hunter comes over to the doctor and he seems to kind of want to be his friend, and the doctor's dismissive. And then when the hunter's alone with Arnie later, when Arnie comes across him hunting and joins in, the hunter reveals like, oh, you can't trust his stories, you know, his wife just left him, she didn't die in a car crash. It's funny as well because they ask him, how did your wife die? And he's like, oh, drink driver. So irresponsible. But he's drink driving the whole time. But then you think the fact that the hunter said his wife left him, a more honest way of maybe saying they died is that they left him, so they kind of died to him. And when they ask what happened to the drink driver, he died. They all died.
Right, yeah.
So I'm stuck thinking, okay, is saying they died a way he can deal with the pain of it by not really facing that he drove them away? Or did he kill them drink driving and he survived, but he says he died because he feels like he died?
I think it's probably the latter. I think he's a sensationalist. I think he's a liar. He's clearly an alcoholic. So it's probably the latter. I mean, I hope it's the latter. You know, I hope he didn't kill his whole family.
Well, you don't know, because they really don't completely clarify any of these little nuances between the characters, or a lot of the nuances like that anyway, especially the more background characters. But that nearly makes it richer because you try and fill in the gaps yourself. And it's like any movie trailer can make even a terrible film look amazing, as long as you show little glimpses and then let your brain fill in the gaps, because what you will come up with will always be better than anything else anyone else could come up with, because it's yourself yourself. Like, obviously, you're nearly getting to tailor the film to your own ideas of what it should be.
It's back to that conversation of films doing a good job of leaving things to your interpretation. My point of view is a lot of films these days, I don't know if they think it's because the audience are dumb and need it. You're spoon-fed every single narrative, and I don't personally like that. I like to use my brain to come to my conclusions, and I like the fact that the film does this. I mean, you just there, like, gone into layers and layers of it that might not actually be true. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it's smart writing because it kind of outsources a lot of the creativity to the audience member, so you get to enjoy it because you're still feeling or wondering about the characters after the film's ended. But like I said, Arnie meets up with the hunter and he actually walks along and shoots just a random cow. And that's how the hunter comes across him, because he's also a farmer. And he's like, that's one of my cows. And Arnie makes good about it by gifting him one of his guns.
Desert Eagle.
The Desert Eagle, yeah, with the biggest handgun in the world.
Oh. And then he's got a shotgun and he's like, oh, my father gave this to me. And can I look at it? Arnie opens a bag and it's like that scene from The Matrix where they go into the thing at the end and the metal detectors go off. And he's like, sir, and he opens his jacket and it's like full of guns. And then they're like little kids in a toy shop. They're just running around in the forest shooting random birds and like with Uzis. You know, they really bond by the fireplace at night. And he's telling him about the doctor, as you said, Declan. He tells him that he used to beat up his children and stuff, and even he beat up the kids once or twice to make the doctor feel better. And you're like, what the fuck? Arnie's like, wait, he beat the kids. And then we get his flashback scene, him in a really weird tight corridor, and as you said, the grading's very ethereal and very trippy, and the dad's like, where are you going? And he's like, I'm just going to see my Swedish friend. And for no reason whatsoever, he just slaps him up, like
bitch slaps him. But it's not a slap your kid moment, even if it was like the 50s. It was just like, who are you meeting? I was like, my friend. Bitch slaps him. Are you going to study? Yes, we're going to study.
Bang.
Bitch slaps him again, and then just says, okay, goodbye. And it's a really weird tone, because you get the feeling he probably gets bitch slapped 40 times a day for no apparent reason, just in conversation or answering questions.
But his justification is he like bitch slaps him, and like when he says he is going to study, he's like, education is key, just bitch slaps him again. Like, it's like, what the fuck? Anyway, he's got a little air gun, and he goes out into the forest with this kid into the woods, and they're shooting at stuff, and you know, he gives the gun to the other nerdy kid. He hands the gun to the other little kid. You can see Arnie, like the talking dynamic, is in charge. He's next to the little nerd. He's got a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, like acting all cool, like, no, you will do it, you gay boy, or whatever. And he like slaps him and pressures him to do it. And when he does shoot, he seemingly hits someone out of shot, because we hear this horrible scream, and then Arnie goes running off out of frame and finds this kid killed over, thinks it's a real gun, I guess, because he's like screaming like a little bitch. Arnie calms him down nicely. He's like, stop being a baby, stop being a baby. It's an air gun. Like, lifts his trousers up, and it's just a mere scratch.
He relaxes, but then you hear another shot, and they go back to where the little nerd kid had been left, who obviously thought it was a real gun still, thought he'd shot his friend, and he's shot himself in the head and seemingly killed himself. I guess, I don't know if he shot himself in the eye or what, but he's apparently dead. And you see that's the trauma Arnie's been carrying around all this time. Now, I get he's bonded with the hunter, and he's found his love of shooting, and he's now shooting with a real gun, but I don't get what trauma he dealt with. Like the other guys, I can kind of see the motivation to stay here, but I guess it's the fact that he loves guns and he loves hunting. You know, he didn't want to go off and study. He doesn't want to be a bully like his dad was and his dad's turned him into. So he's decided, I am going to stay here and I'm going to hunt. He's become a sort of calmer, warmer person. You know, he comes in and he's throwing all the food down. Every time Torkid tries to delude himself saying, you know, what if there's customers? You got to stay here. Arnie would always say, there's not going to be customers. Like, relax. Like, this isn't real, man. You're still deluding yourself. By this point, even though he's still saying there's not going to be customers, he's past that. He doesn't seem to care anymore. He comes back to the house that they're slowly decorating, and he's got a fox over his shoulder and a fucking llama under one arm and a fucking couple of pheasants tied to his belt. I'm in. I hunt animals. I love it. Me and that hunter, he's going to be like the dad I never had. Instead of beating me and bitching about education, he's just going to go hunting with me all day, every day. And like we said with all the others, he says howdy.
It kind of is like with Now and I again, when they go to the pub and find the mysterious gamekeeper who gives him a pheasant by slapping it against the bar. Arnie is that guy, you know.
So it's all going well until Stefan's missus show up. Knocks at the door, she walks in and she's kind of looking around like all happy, like, oh, what is this place? You're doing up a restaurant? What's going on? And they're all kind of looking at Stefan like, fuck did you do? Why did you invite her here? Now you get the feeling that he didn't invite her. He specifically said not to come here because he's shocked to see her too. Well, she's finally revealing her dickhead girlfriend qualities where she's a bit controlling, a bit intrusive, kind of forcing her way in where she's not been welcomed necessarily. So now, as the audience, you're supposed to be getting on side with hating her. But at the same time, even Arnie, when he sees them strolling around all happy on the beach, is kind of like, give her a chance, tall kid, you know? Look how happy he is. And they're all looking at him like, who the fuck is this? Like, Arnie's a psychopath who goes around shooting everything he can. But even he's trying to convince tall kid to be nice to her and accept her a little bit.
Stefan's just doing the classic thing of, you know, when your girlfriend doesn't like your friends, he's kind of like trying to convince her they're good guys. And she's like, no, you need to go. They're insane. Like, they've got guns, which is a fair point. Like, and then she does the classic girlfriend thing of making them play the stupidest game I've ever seen called Suck Eggs or something. I don't really get it. They're just all painting eggs outside by the sea. And then the aim of the game is to then suck the eggs.
You do a little prick from one side and then a prick at the top. And the idea is you blow all the egg yolk out of the egg from the bottom so it becomes a completely hollow shell.
Oh, well, it's still shit anyway.
It's completely shit, yeah.
It's still one of the worst games I've ever heard. Imagine at Christmas, your dad's like, do you want to play Suck Hollow Eggs? I'll be like, fuck off. She's sitting next to Tall Kid and he's trying to do it. And she's been like, ha ha, you're so bad at this, Tall Kid. And you're kind of sitting there like, even Stefan and the others are like looking around like, stop.
But she just won't go. She's just like, oh, Tall Kid, you're the worst egg blower I've ever seen.
Egg blower in history. And then it's bad because even you as the audience member can see that he's about to snap. And lo and behold, hey ho, he does snap and punches her directly in the face.
Torgild, prøv lige at se. Nu skal jeg vise dig, hvordan du skal.
Han...
Nej, lad lige være, Stefan. Torgild, hvis du nu...
Kom til at kæft til dig!
Mate, he decks her. I gotta be honest, I could see obviously he was getting wound up. I did not expect it at all. And it's so well filmed, the way he thumps her and the shock of it. And she's so fucked up, like her nose is bleeding straight away and she's concussed. And I'm sure she'll remember it later, but she seems to just not know what happened. And everyone awkwardly just looks to the side and Stefan does nothing and just kind of like helps her back inside while she's like, what's going on?
I felt really bad for Stefan because, you know, as you said earlier, he's the youngest of the group. He doesn't really know what's going on. He's a dunce and like, what can he do in that situation? He's clearly scared of Tall Kid.
He could have done a little bit.
He could have
more.
been like, why'd you fucking do that? Like,
I guarantee Tall Kid wouldn't do shit if he like stood up to him. He wouldn't be mean to him if he stood up to him.
Yeah.
It was funny the way he hit her though, isn't it?
Oh, it was great. And then her nose starts bleeding and lo and behold, she's not very happy and she convinces Stefan to like leave. And, you know, Stefan even takes their van that Tall Kid's gone into the town to get and drives off with them. And in the drive to wherever they're going, you can see that she's like chatting bare shit and you can see Stefan starts to kind of get annoyed at her and think, I kind of want to be back with the lads. You know?
Yeah, it's that classic thing where you get with a girl and it's all roses at first and you love bombing each other and everything's great and the sex is great and you just have this good feeling. And then you flash forward a couple of months and you're sitting in a car and there's this whiny voice next to you going, why didn't you do this? You didn't stand up for me then. And when we get to here, you got to do this because we've got a kid now and you got to man up and blah, blah, blah. And you find yourself thinking like, how did I get here? I just sleepwalked into this. This started off great and it gradually turned into this pile of shit.
You know, they're getting no customers, but like they're literally going along with this facade that it's a restaurant but no one's come in. Anyway, two people do walk in and they're like, oh, finally some customers. But going with the history of this film and the history of their lives, nothing can ever be good for this quartet of lads, and it's a hold up. They literally get their guns out and empty the register, and this is a great scene because Arnie's at the table with one of the other lads and he's literally like laughing. It's like the robbers from Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
Like, oh, they're amateurs. Arnie gets up and disarms them, and they end up thrashing one of them nearly to death, don't they, Declan? It's quite a violent scene.
It's a great bit of violence because it's kind of out of nowhere. They're basically letting them go because the two guys are pussied out. And then Arnie's just, I guess he's annoyed. He's like, why are you letting them? I mean, they have nothing in the register. It's literally like coins because they haven't had any customers. But Arnie's still like, nah, it's the principle, man. You can't let these guys go away. So he smashes a jar and repeatedly smashes the chunks of broken glass into this guy's face. Now, this film does not contain a lot of violence. Apparently, when it was released in Denmark, it received a lot of criticism for the violence, which I don't get on two hands. Firstly, it's not that violent a film. It's got one or two violent moments, you know, hitting that woman in the face, which was played for comedy, and this moment where it is seriously violent, clearly the most violent moment of the film. This guy is absolutely getting glass embedded into his face so many times. But I feel like cartoonish violence gets a pass, whereas real graphic violence doesn't in films with a lot of people. And I never understand that because, say if you were making a Holocaust movie, would they be more offended if you did Schindler's List, where you're taking it really seriously, or if you did a comedy or if you did a cartoonish representation?
Probably the cartoon.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's this weird thing with violence where they're fine with the cartoonish violence. You know, like the Deadpool kind of violence where you're showing horrific things, but it's cartoonish and played for comedy. Whereas real violence where they're showcasing it for what it really is, like this horrific, awful, visually disgusting act. They're upset about that. Like, I never get the logic of it.
I guess when it's cartoonish, you're like, it takes a bit of the sting out of it, I guess, but I totally understand your point. And you talked earlier on about, look, we all know that this idyllic situation hangs in the balance because we've got the Eskimo still about. We don't know where he is, but we do know in the back of my mind, Declan, that situation has to be resolved. At some point, he's going to come along. And you said earlier you thought it was going to be the hunter that grasses him up. You was wrong because it actually is the two buffoons that tried to rob the joint. They come over comically. One of them's like wrapped up in bandages, that's been beaten up, like tied up at the top of his head. And the Eskimo's like, why are you bothering me when I'm playing pool? Like being all like, I'm the boss, you know? And it's them that grass him up. They went to this remote house. There's 4 guys there. The Eskimo's like, that's fucking them. Do you know what I mean? And he's coming now.
So the Eskimo and all the gangsters roll in. But before that happens, we see Stefan's childhood memory. Kind of looks like a young Mick Jagger. He's got these proper blowjob lips. The young version of him. He's like, looks all weird looking. And it's funny as well because it's presented as if they're all friends and met when they were kids. Because he came up in this seemingly really overbearing household. Everyone's always criticizing and commenting. And, you know, if he's at the dinner table, they're like, sit up straight and get your elbows off the table. And you never do that right. And why do you always do this wrong? And you can see how it relates to his nagging girlfriend who fucking won't just shut the fuck up. And he says, fuck this. And he leaves the house. He ends up on a train platform and he's with the younger versions of all the other characters as well. But they're all the same age and they're not the same age when they're grown up. So you realise obviously that's not really happened. They didn't really meet each other at this age. But it's kind of symbolic of they were all lost boys and they've all kind of come together and they're on a train platform where they're going somewhere together, like journey by themselves. Like that's not symbolism that anyone's going to miss. I don't really give a shit about the train aspect or any of that, but I like the fact that they kind of come together in their own shared trauma dream sequence world that's within the film.
Yeah, I kind of like it better. Like they're all broken lads and, you know, the symbolism together, they mend each other, like rather than where they actually met at different stages of their lives. I thought that was really well done.
So Stefan ditches his girlfriend and returns with the van, but it's just as the Eskimo and all his thugs have shown up. The Eskimo came across the doctor who they beat the shit out of, and actually he grasses him up and tells him where he is. But I guess, so I was kind of thinking, that's a shame to end the doctor's story in the film that way, where he's basically beaten up and grasses on a lot of them. So the Eskimos and the thugs got them all at gunpoint and they're ready to kill him. They're all sat down at the table. He's saying, where's the money? And he's like, look, it's gone. We bought this place. We're making a restaurant. And he's like, restaurant? What the fuck are you talking about? And it's funny because you get a glimpse into his character where it's nearly like he's jealous of their friendship. You know, when you hear your friends went out to something together and you didn't get the text and you're bitter, you's like, why didn't I get invited? He's sort of given those vibes. You see everyone in this film, they're in it for the money. They're talking about their money. Where's their money? But ultimately their money gets traded traded for richer, more meaningful things in their lives that they trade it off for. And you get the feeling even the gangster deep down, he doesn't actually care about the missing money. He's more hurt by the fact that it's like, why wasn't I involved? Like, why are you always running off together and I didn't even get an invite to your birthday party?
Yeah, I was about to say that he says that when he's beating up Torkid in the back room, like, where was my invite? You can be this big dog, but like at the end of the day, if you're lonely, you're still lonely. Like, you're
Even
still
Dog the Bounty Hunter needed friends.
yeah, Beth and all that. Yeah, like
Give me a tip, where?
classic. We're like, oh shit, it's coming to a head now. He's just about to pull the trigger and finish him off, finish the film. Our plucky heroes are at their end point. Bang! The door bursts open. The hunter comes in with like some weird submachine.
He's got an Uzi.
And he's literally just like GTA Vice City when you're just like gunning people down. He's just spraying it off. He can't even control the recoil. Everyone's just hiding behind fireplaces and he guns them all down and you're like, yes, get in, mate.
This was the one scene where I was legitimately cracking up.
It went on for about 10 minutes.
It was the way they filmed it as well, where he was just like, he burst in with his big moustache and the doctor was in tow as well and he just starts fucking blapping a lot of them.
It's like a cartoon floating around the air, like just firing off. We see in the next scene, I guess it's flash forward a bit because the restaurant's open. We see a lovely shot coming in of the restaurant there, the Danish flag high up in the air. Everything's all colourful and bright and you're like, yay, like, and then it goes...
You're like, yay.
You're like, yay. And then it goes in and Torkid's all nervous and he comes to the back of the kitchen. All the other three are there like, you know who's coming in? And then his girlfriend comes in with the boyfriend.
A pussy boyfriend.
You got the hunter and the doctor at the bar drinking their beers.
And they're chilling together as well. So they seem to have become friends now and they're just up at the bar talking. Points them out from two customers because they're asking like, oh, is this where the shootout happened? And oh, they died right here. Well, can we have this table where they actually died and where their bodies were found? And was it you that shoot him? And he was like, no, it was the hunter up at the bar. And they point to them. So it's nearly like the fact that that big shootout crazy story has become sort of a myth about this place and made it into a tourist site. So now that even though they're in the middle of nowhere, they do have loads of customers.
Everyone knows about it, bar the police, because nothing happens to them. Like, they've just committed murders, but everyone's cool because it's Eskimo. He's a scumbag anyhow. The ex-girlfriend comes in with the nerd from the paper. They sit down at the table and Torkid's like trying to compensate. He's like, no, everything's for free. She's like, no, just give us the normal service. We'll pay. Give us the normal menu. They sit down and the dickhead boyfriend's perusing the menu like, this looks shit. He goes into the back and even Arnie's like, you know, I can't do fancy dining. I can't even make an egg. And he's like, guys, just do your best for me. And there was a really touching moment. And what I really like about this last scene is it goes to the girlfriend's voiceover and she's the food reviewer and she's like, it really was the worst food I've ever had in my whole life, but for this restaurant 4 stars simply because of the people that run it. 1 for Torkid, 1 for Peter, 1 for Arnie, 1 for Stefan, and the camera just pans out and it leaves us on this idyllic restaurant and they finally made it. You know, it's kind of symbolic. They just fall into things one after the other. They were lost in life, but from that final bit it's finally like all 4 of them have found a place together.
Yeah, it really sold it for me. I loved everything about the ending, the way it showed you what the restaurant, now that it's actually fully running and has customers, the fact that it's become like this tourist destination because of the killings that happened there, the fact that the doctor and the hunter are 2 friends and seemingly local celebrities, and free beer and food for life, so they're happy chilling up at the bar. You see the 4 friends are all together, working together, making it work. I didn't really like the fact that Torkid's kind of auditioning for her approval in the last sequence. Like, it wasn't really the arc I wanted for his character. Not that she was a bitch, like she had her rights to dump him because he was going nowhere. Everything she said was true, but it was just kind of like he was still jumping through laps for someone else's validation right at the end, so it was a bit like But if I ignore that, I really did like the ending and how it's summed the whole film up. So do you recommend Flickering Lights?
I was really pleasantly surprised about this. I like the path that it went. It started off, as you said, a gangster film, then a road trip film, then a really like touching, poignant film about friendship and finding your place in the world. So yeah, I'd highly recommend Flickering Lights.
Absolutely, yeah. That's an easy recommendation for Flickering Light.